This meeting is being recorded.
All right, then we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the APCHA Housing Authority meeting of August 18th, which is impossibly late into the year of 2021, slightly concerning. We have a quorum here to start. We may have other members joining. Cindy, would you read the roll?
Yes. David?
Yes, I am here.
Skippy?
Present.
Francie?
Here.
So who was out is John Ward, Rachel Richards. Rick Head, and he might join later because he was gonna join through Zoom. I think that, yeah, but we do have a quorum.
Yep. And Carson will not be here
And Carson
today.
is definitely
Nor will
out.
Kelly.
Right.
So if anyone else shows
You get
up,
a quorum with only 3 people?
I know, isn't this so fun?
Because there's 5 voting members,
crazy.
so the quorum is 3.
And I have reached out to
Wow.
Rachel to see if she has anything to add via text if she's not going to join. So with that, we will move into our public comment section for today. There is nobody in the room, but there may be somebody joining in the digital space. So if you are a member of the public and interested in providing comment to the board on anything not on today's agenda, please just unmute yourself, state your first and last name for the record, and you have 3 minutes to share whatever is on your mind. And Rick is joining.
Yay.
For the record, Rick Head is making it. Gosh, we're so glad to see you.
Yes.
And we're just waiting to see if there's any public comment coming in, Rick. And it does not seem like there is. We'll give it just another second. All right, we will close the public comment portion of this meeting. Rick, welcome. Do you have anything you want to say before we jump in?
No, but I apologize for my absence lately, everyone, and thank you for your patience. But I'm back. I'm going to see if I can get through this next 3 hours.
You just take it easy,
Yeah,
man. I'm
really
just glad
great
to
to
see
see
you.
you.
Yeah, I'm really glad to see you healing up, man. Cool.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So we'll turn it over to executive director or staff comments. We've got Diane in the digital space and Cindy here in the room.
Great. May I share my screen?
You may. And Phyllis.
And Maddie, can you give me permission to do so? Thanks. And while Maddie's giving me permission, Rick, it's really good to see you and that you amend, and facial hair works for you. I know it's probably not optional at this point.
Well, if I had the strength in this right hand, I would shave, but I can't even get my hand up to my face, so you're going to have to live with it.
Well, great to see you're doing well. And
Thank you,
sorry I
Diane.
can't be there. I've got a surgery for a deviated septum tomorrow, and somebody at the city told me in Aspen that's code word for a nose job. But no, mine's really a deviated septum. And so I had my negative COVID test this morning, and so I have to quarantine until the surgery. That's the protocol right now at A.P.C.H.A. So
Good luck with that surgery.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to breathing.
Yeah.
Okay, let me share this screen, and you should now be able to see. There we go. Okay. First off, thank you all for coming to the barbecue. It was a really fun opportunity to just get to see the board in a social manner. So we appreciate your time and getting to show off the new office. It's been a really good space for everybody, and it is so wonderful to have everybody in one space. Next up, just a heads up that we'll be bringing you the budget. Probably we'll bring a draft in September. Cindy and I are, Cindy actually is working on it, and I kind of am like doing color commentary on it. But we're working through that right now. We do have we are requesting a capital repairs position, and as I mentioned in the last meeting, the city, and you'll see in the work plan, the city may be interested in funding a policy and data analyst that would do work on other housing things for the city, but also be involved with APCHA. With capital repairs, we did have a wonderful, Cindy and I had a wonderful call with at Francie's suggestion at one of the recent board meetings. She suggested getting together with her sons, and we talked with Forrest Jacober, and just had a really good hour-long discussion last evening. And we got some really good specific ideas, things like the position we're thinking about for capital repairs probably isn't senior enough. He actually talked about advantages of hiring a higher level property manager, thought we should actually issue a request for proposals to get ideas, elicit some ideas from the building industry. And he actually said that this might be a good time to do it, specifically because folks they're starting to think about next year. And so this is a good time to go out with those. And he also provided some other good advice. We do plan on talking to some more, at least one other person who is a longtime builder in the Roaring Fork Valley, but that'll be all coming back to you as a board probably in September. Wanted to let you know that Home Trek continues to go well, and one of the commitments we made last year when we asked both the BOCC and the City Council for additional operating funds for Home Trek, we committed to, because the cost of Salesforce licenses is $126,000 a year. That was what we committed to, was seeing if there was a way we could reduce those licensing costs. We just finished a $24,000 proof of concept project. We did the City Strategy and Innovation Office and Karen Harrington helped us a lot kind of evaluate this, and this firm basically went in and looked at, could we change the community portal to a different piece of software using WordPress to still talk to Salesforce, but we can potentially get rid of up to $80,000 in annual licensing costs. There will be an initial capital cost to do that. Andrew Miller, who is our business analyst on Home Trek, is doing some additional work right now with Revision to figure out, just to try to cross the I's and dot the T's to make sure it is what we think it is. But they've come back and said, yes, we do think it's possible. Unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to get it done before 2022, so we would need to pay the full 126 next year. But we do think the following year, and we think it's probably a 4 to 5 year return on investment if we make the change. So Cindy and Bethany, Andrew and I are meeting on how to fund it, and we may be coming forth with a request for some one-time money. However, it's much less than what it costs to build Home Trek, and we do think it has a lot of return on investment. And then that's it. So questions?
That's great. Just for the record, Rachel Richards is now here with us as well. Any questions?
My apologies for being late. I'm leaving town this evening and have been squeezing in 1,000 last-minute details. So that's all. And yeah, they changed my flight till 6 a.m. in the morning instead of 10 a.m. So we're making the midnight run down there. And then I just wanted to kind of mention that I am wearing a mask during the meeting. We are seeing Delta really come back in our community in a way that's scary. None of us know if we who are vaccinated may become asymptomatic carriers. And we discussed this a little bit at our meeting last night, or Monday night, when it was council. And we got a reply from the chamber saying, well, why don't you guys start leading by example about indoor masking and mask indoors at your meetings? So that's what I'm going to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Francis, do you have any questions? I can't see hands while the other screen's up. Or Rick?
I do not.
Nope. Okay. Diane, anything else?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So we'll close the executive director part of this and move into the consent calendar today. That's the minutes of July 28th and the settlement agreement between APCHA and the Trek Bicycle Corporation. Does anyone want to pull any of this or make a motion to adopt?
I do not want to pull any, but for the public's information, perhaps a little discussion of why we're settling with Trek Bicycle Company and what that is from the director or from Cindy.
Well, it's because of the word, because of home track, we did do a trademark on that. Trek Bicycle felt that people might get confused between home trek for us and Trek Bicycle for them. So there's really not too much in the agreement itself. Jim True, actually, the city attorney, actually worked on it and worked with them to come up with something. So it's just kind of a what do you call it? An informality, or just a formal type of thing going forward with regard to the trademark. And I don't know if Diane knows anything more about this, but
But there was no monetary
no,
settlement or
absolutely
anything over
not.
this, yeah.
Right.
And
right.
we're still allowed to use the name Home Track.
Exactly, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. You know, the one thing I've been thinking about, and it's not immediate, and maybe it's happened and I missed it, but I think it'd be great to be able to have a show on GrassRoots TV about how Home Trek operates. You know, for a half-hour film and maybe demo some people's places who've agreed to or whatever. Either that or as it fits into the work schedule for the BOCC or the City Council, because then they would also be televised for the general public. But, you know, we keep talking about how great Home Trek is, and other than this board, I'm not sure how many of the other electeds have seen the merits or the value through a demonstration. And as we're asking for more money, that might help.
And I thought at one point in time that Andrew had worked with some city council members and some BOCC who were interested in going through that.
Yeah,
I
and no,
know
it's
he
more
set
for
up
the
some stuff,
public.
whether they showed up or not, I'm not sure, but for public, we also have a lot of YouTube videos and stuff like that on there for people who actually want to use it, but we'll look into that.
Yeah, again, it's nothing immediate. As I said, the bases might already be covered, but it just seems that bringing everyone up to speed, including the community, as opposed to, if you're interested, look at this, you know, we could at least get it out there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Rachel, that's a good idea. Andrew has given a demo. I think most people have been through a demo, but we can reoffer those, so that's a good idea. And on track, the settlement is actually, it's pretty narrow. It's very common to do a settlement agreement on a particular use or category. This one basically says we're not going to expand our use of the name, so we can't use home trekking or things like that. So it's pretty narrow, and for anyone who hasn't seen the letter to the editor that starts with, I was going to go buy a mountain bike, and by mistake I bought a affordable housing unit. You have to go see that one.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, Diane. And again, I know people are familiar, and I know you've been reaching out, but I'm trying to think about the people who don't live in APCHA housing, who perhaps watch our budgets and what we spend our money on and want to know what is this new Home Trek system. So again, I was thinking of it, how do we get it out to the broader community?
Right.
Thank you.
We'll eventually also provide a list of all the reports that we can run on it as well. So everybody will be able to see the type of information that we'll be able to garner from Home Trek as well.
Thank you.
Great.
Cindy, I'm glad you brought that up because that's a good preview. So Andrew has been working on a series of reports that the initial one will be basically he'll come and do a presentation at a board meeting of here's all the basics about APCHA that you might not have known in the past. So it'll be metrics, and I think in a lot of ways the best way to show a system because there are lots of demos online and things like that, and frankly when we did community demo, we had very low participation. What we found was people will go see the system when they need to use it. And the feedback we've gotten for the most part is if you're doing simple transactions, it's simple. If you're doing like qualifications, it is complicated, but it's a whole lot easier than creating a packet. But I think when it comes to showing folks, here's the power of Home Trek, that's where the rubber will meet the road. And right now we've got that tentatively scheduled for September. Thank you.
Hey, great. Thank you.
Awesome. Rick, Francie, did you guys have any questions?
No, thanks.
Sure. Madeline, is it possible to put up the participant list so I can see their hands if they have them?
You can also see them on the little screen if they raise them.
There. Oh, okay. Cool. Thank you. Okay, so with that, take a motion on the consent calendar.
I'd make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I second that motion.
I'll second the motion.
I'm gonna give it to Rick because he's been gone for a while.
He's going to be gone.
And good to see you up there, Rick.
It's the best second in the business.
Okay.
Yeah. Cindy, would you read the roll?
Yes. Francie,
Aye.
Rachel,
Aye.
Rick,
Yes.
and David.
Yes.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great. So we're going to move forward into first readings. This is regulation changes for anyone watching in the public. The board has had initial presentations on each of these things by staff. We've talked at length about them. And so these are coming back for first reading. This is our first attempt to look at it comprehensively. There's opportunity for public comment here. And then this will also come back for second readings. What we're hoping to do is advance these to a second reading. So if you're reading about this in the paper later on, you'll have another opportunity to come forth before any of this gets adopted. We have been doing some kind of more free-flowing conversations, which I think has been really nice. But now that we are half and half on the digital today, I'm going to just be looking to you guys for some hands just so I can make sure that these guys are getting heard as well. And
Okay.
I'll do my best to keep it free-flowing as we do so. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to staff. We're going to take these one at a time. So let's start with the removal of special review regulations.
And that's on page 17 of the guidelines.
Thank you for printing these out.
So the first one is regarding retired or disabled Pitkin County employees. We have recommended a change for a full-time employer or worker to actually retire. They have to work 10 years immediately prior to their retirement in order to retire. So it was 4. We felt that it just doesn't do it justice for workforce housing. So we have recommended 10 to move that up to 10 years, and the board did support that, realizing that it is workforce housing, but still allowing somebody to retire in their unit. And with regards to disabled, we did talk about moving that up to 10 as well, but it was decided, and it will remain the same at a 4-year work history prior to a disability, that you can remain in your unit.
Yeah.
Great. So first, if we can just do questions or clarifications that anyone has, and then we'll turn around for a discussion.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you for that. I just wanted to mention that we did have public comment at a city council meeting with a citizen who was concerned that eliminating special review might leave our board with no avenues to deal with unique or incredibly unusual circumstances that may come up. And, Skippy and I both pointed out that that was part of the reason of getting rid of special review, so that should something really be unique enough that should change the guidelines and then be available to everyone, we would process it in that way. And so I agree with that general philosophy, but this one item just makes me think about something, and I'm not trying to hold it up, and I'm not going to. But what if somebody had worked here for 30 years, and as they were working their last 10, 40 years, they were injured and unable to work for a year. And so now they've worked 30 consecutive years, but in their last 10, they only worked 9 because there was 1 year where they were injured. Is that the type of thing we just standardly take into consideration?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought, but I just want to be clear because, sometimes, especially as you're getting towards older age, you're likely to have some sort of disability that's going to perhaps take you out of the workforce
Right.
for a little bit of a time, And
And
so,
especially when it comes to an injury or something like that. And as we would actually ask for documentation on that, but we would definitely take that into consideration.
yeah, I just wanted to know, and I believe that. But that, again, that was the type of thing this person wanted to know on special review. Were we boxing ourselves in to not be able to solve problems in a timely manner? Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I don't see any from there. Any questions on this? No. Okay, so the question I would have
Now
is,
Francie's hand went up.
oh, Francie.
I just wanted to let you guys know I'm having a really violent storm right here at my house, so if I get watched out or something, that's why. So I'm glad some other people showed up to make a quorum.
Okay, thanks, Francie.
Francie. So on this issue of the removal of special review
That is later on in the,
it's
Yeah.
that's further down.
Yeah, we can
So if we're
keep
taking these
going
in
in time.
order, I just thought I'd bring that up. If we
no,
were
I'd love to
taking
take
these
them in order, but I'm looking at the order on my packet right here. So which one?
I know, it's, but on the memo itself, by page number, it's
Okay.
on page 51, and we're on page
Got it.
17.
So we'll do the modification of retirement and display,
Right.
which is what I have in my notes. Okay,
Okay.
great. So not seeing any further questions on that, I do have one. And I remember in the discussion that we talked about for the early retirement, tying that to the Social Security language. And I
Early
just-
retirement age.
Yeah, and I just didn't see that specifically anywhere in the language, and maybe I missed it, but are we omitting that, or how are we
No,
answering that?
it should still, if it doesn't, it should still say as defined in the regulations. And it does.
Which
Retirement age as
page?
defined in part 8 of these regulations. So
And
that's.
in that is where
Mhm.
it's shown, which is how
Okay,
I
and
missed it.
what page is that?
It is on page 17.
Okay, I know, I'm
Or
on
the
17.
big 42. Yeah.
Yeah, are we talking big or small?
Okay, because I thought all the changes were in red. You're saying that there's some
Well, we
language
did- and that
added?
is not in red because we're not changing that. It's no matter, it's still, it's still defined in the housing regulations, and that's always been in the regulations. So that is not in red because we are not changing that. You still can't retire at the age of 50. It still has
Right,
to be.
I understand that, but I'm just lost here, with between the black and the red. What's the new red insert, if there is one, that we discussed about retiring at early Social Security age if you've worked 15
That is further on down.
I think that was the disconnect, was
That's
just
the-
that
yeah,
it's
I didn't see
not
that.
in that same section.
Yeah.
And that could be, I apologize, I'm so used to poor Bethany going through this.
Yeah, no
Um,
problem.
And that, I think, is something, I know we talked about that, but I don't think that was part of the first reading for this.
Okay, that helps me a lot, makes it much more clear, you're
But
absolutely.
it does state the changes requiring at least a 10-year work history. I think we're gonna bring that back at a later meeting for discussion, and then to bring it back for first and second reading.
Okay, so the modification of retirement and disability work history that's on the agenda is not actually in the packet for first reading tonight.
That if somebody's worked 30 years, that is not.
Okay.
The 10-year work requirement is.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes.
That's where I was,
Yeah.
I think we were both
That one
confused.
is
So
in
that's going to be a
that was in it,
separate
yeah.
piece from this second
Okay.
round of things we did.
Right.
And then,
right.
when we get to that point, where would we insert it in the guidelines? Kind of in this
You know, I know it's in there because we brought it to you guys before. I don't want to take the time to try and look through all these to figure out where it's gonna be.
Okay,
'Cause
yeah,
I
no,
don't-
that's okay.
I don't have that red line version with me.
No, that's
so-
okay. I'm just saying, when we get there, I'd like to try to keep things of the same topic in the same zone. And one other last question here, and it may be the language that we've always used, but the way that it says retired or disabled former Pitkin County employees, it sounds like the government of Pitkin County employees, as opposed to all employees who work within Pitkin County. And it's just an English thing, but retired or disabled former Pitkin County employees, sounds like you had
It
to work
does.
for the county
Yes, it does.
to
That's what I
qualify.
thought it meant when I read it.
Yeah,
So,
and so we need to change that.
employees within
will
Pitkin
change
County.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Always
Yeah.
within Pitkin County.
within
Yeah.
Pitkin
It's a
County.
whole nother story.
yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay. That's great.
Mr. Chair, sorry, Skippy, just a quick heads up. I just wanted to confirm, Cindy's absolutely correct. I just searched the packet for retirement. And when we come back to that, and she's correct, we're not doing it at this meeting, because Bethany felt like we weren't ready, that wasn't ripe, that needed a little more discussion. That in your packet is on page 62. It's on page 87 of the packet, but on page 62 of the regulations. Maddie, you don't need to go there. But that's where the specifications about retirement age for APCHA housing, it's in the definitions.
Got it. Okay.
Thank
And
you.
that will come back. Okay. Thank you guys
Yep.
for that distinction. So with that clarification and parsing of these into two separate pieces, is there anyone amongst us who either would not support this modification of retirement and disability work history moving forward, or would like to suggest a change or alteration to the rest of the board for consideration?
No.
No,
Okay.
as long as it's clear that it's
Yeah.
everybody.
Okay. Then what I'm hearing for staff is to bring this back to second reading with that small alteration to make sure we're talking about all qualified employees in Pitkin County
Right.
rather than employees of Pitkin County. Great. So on your list now, what is the next
The
bullet?
second one is bid submission, which is on page 27 of the regulations and on page 52 of the packet.
Okay. So transfers outside the bid process. Staff, if you can walk us through this, please.
So the transfers is later.
Oh.
Limiting up one category.
Yes, that's
It's
what-
backwards
that's
is what
I
we're
know.
doing.
And I
I'm
should
just
have looked
gonna
at the agenda.
read
and
my
I didn't.
agenda this way.
You're losing me.
Yeah.
Okay. Bidding.
So what this does is, it states that only applicants that are qualified by APCHA may submit bids on ownership units. Bids obviously at a higher price than the listed sales price will not be accepted. If otherwise qualified, ownership applicants may be permitted to bid for a unit in one category higher than the category for which they are approved. However, they can never bid on something lower.
Right.
So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it fair, more fair for the people in higher categories, so they don't have to compete with category 1 and 2 people because they don't have the ability to bid on category 1s and 2s, and also monetarily as well. We feel that the more expensive a unit is, the more somebody who doesn't have a lot of income, it's kind of a disservice to them. And last thing we want somebody to do is to bite off more than they can chew, that they think that they can do it, and then all of a sudden they lose their housing. So
Yeah.
we feel that this is one step to help that, by just allowing somebody to bid on their category and one up.
Do we have any questions about this?
Yeah, I have a question.
Jump in, Rick.
What happens to people that are aging out and want to trade down? Does that affect them?
I'll tell you, Rick, right now, they would have to requalify at that category. If I think that's a later discussion, obviously, for downsizing. To me, it would be a waiver or some type of an exemption if we go there, if somebody wants to downsize. But right now, if somebody wants to go into a smaller unit, and honestly, if somebody who has worked here for a really long time, their retirement stuff might put them out of that category anyway. So right now, the way the regulations are is if you change where you're living and you want another unit, even if it's a smaller unit, if you're higher than what that category is, you cannot qualify for it. But again, that's a later discussion for the board to talk about when we talk about downsizing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Rick, I'll just say, looking at the long-term agenda, once we get through our standards for sellers, which we're now renaming to something, but once we're through that, and OEZ, right sizing is on there. So it's something that we anticipate sometime this year taking on, and we'll be very excited to see you come for public comment when we miss you.
Hey, thanks. I can't wait.
Question?
Only
No.
3 minutes, though. He'll only get 3 minutes.
Yes, that's true.
Okay. This is more of a comment in support of the change. I live at Hunter Creek Condominiums, originally Silver King, Silver Slum,
Silver Slum.
as they used to call it back in the day, where there's still rumors out there that drywall was hung with duct tape, I'm constantly now fighting mold that I think is coming up from the basement, not in the walls. It's a concrete building, so mold loves concrete. But there was recently a Burlingame listing for a 2-bedroom Category 2 at about $157,000. At the same week, there was a listing for a Category 4 Hunter Creek condominium for $157,000. One product was built 40 years ago as cheap rental housing. The other was built for year-round residential housing. The real difference is somebody could look at that 157 for a Category 4 Hunter Creek and say, wow, I can afford that. It's such a smoking deal. But the HOA dues are starting to run about $800 a month, you know, if you're going to really be ahead of things for winter care. And that's just really unaffordable for a lot of people. So the mortgage rate might sound great, but, you know, and that's not even getting into what they are going to need to do for special assessments to deal with the mold issues and the leaking windows and a lot of the older things there. So I just have to say it's been hard for me to keep up, even though at the time when I bought it 30 years ago, it was like, oh, $64,000, I probably can get it, you know, with just $12,000 down, and I can make those monthly payments. Of course, interest rates, I think, were around 8% then, you know, and we're going to come back to a point in time when people are buying and selling at higher interest rates too. So I'm just saying this in support that the list price is never all that you're getting into when you get a home. And it was interesting for me to look at the pictures online of the lower price unit. I thought, well, that was the refrigerator I replaced, and those are the lighting fixtures I replaced, and nothing has been done in that unit since they were originally turned over with those wonderful fluorescent orange bathroom vanity counters and things like that. So anyhow, I am full support of this. It may seem like you're cutting people out of a range, but it's really, you know, if you got to a place where you're financially secure enough to go up 2 categories from where you really are right now, then you can start bidding on those category units. But to bid on something that you really cannot afford, and I know this from past experience with my real estate license, and it was kind of historical, and it may be a myth now, and it may be a fallacy, but there was a feeling that people's incomes would always rise. And that's why people would get adjustable rate mortgages, because by the time it adjusts, you'll probably be making another $5,000 a year. And that belief system, I think, has really collapsed. A lot of people have been very stagnant in their wages, and especially over the last 20 years. So I fully support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there hearing support from Rachel, which I would echo? Is there anyone who either can't support this or would like to offer any changes or notes for the board to consider? Okay. Then we have direction to bring this back as is for second reading.
Okay. So the next one is on page 28, the next page, and it's conveyances outside the bid process. And the first one has to do the first paragraph just states what we kind of are looking at, that how certain conveyances are not required to go through the bid process and lottery, otherwise applicable in accordance with the regulations. However, all such conveyances must meet all other applicable requirements of the deed restriction and APCHA regulations as determined at the time of approval of the maximum sales price. So the first paragraph just kind of sets it up for the different types of transfers that can happen outside the bid process. For eligible transferees, the first one is an addition of an owner, spouse, child, and sibling, or an addition of an owner. So you're adding a spouse, you're adding a child, or you're adding a sibling. So this means that one of the owners is still maintaining ownership of that unit, but they want to add somebody. So in order to do that, there's certain following requirements must be met. If the owner wishes to add a spouse of the owner, child of the owner, or sibling of the owner to the title to the property as a joint tenant or tenant in common, they can do so. No other family member of the owner is entitled to obtain any interest, so you can't do a sister-in-law or something like that in the property outside the bid process. The individual must be qualified by APCHA prior to the conveyance. Qualified spouse, sibling, and or child does not have to meet the income and asset requirements of the applicable category of the unit, but must meet all the other requirements, which means they have to work, the two main ones are you have to work full-time in Pitkin County, and you can't own any other property in the ownership exclusion zone. So those are the two that they have to meet. They still have to fill out a complete application, but we do not take into consideration their income, their assets, when they're filling that out, or when we're looking at it and approving them. And an individual can be added, but must meet, and that's that second one, we'll put the section in there that states what a qualified buyer is. All such conveyances require a $1,000 transfer fee and a new deed restriction to be signed with both of those owners. So those are the two main things. But again, if it's you're adding somebody as an owner, they still have to qualify as to work history or as to working full-time in Pitkin County and not owning any other property in the ownership exclusion zone. Conveyance of an ownership to a child or child or sibling, and in effect at the time, and that owner is not going to be owning it anymore, there are a couple of more stipulations that person has to meet. Conveyance of an owner's interest in a unit to spouse is not permitted outside the bid process. A conveyance to an owner's child or sibling outside the bid process under this subsection is not permitted unless the child or sibling has been a joint tenant or tenant in common for at least 4 years. So we are looking at a 4-year work history with regards to that. The child or sibling of the owner's interest in the unit must be qualified by APCHA prior to the conveyance. If it's a child of the owner must meet all the requirements of the applicable deed restriction and APCHA regulations for a qualified buyer, subject to the following modifications. Assets and income must be at or below Category 5. So if it's a Category 2 unit, but their income and their assets are Category 5 or below, they're fine. If minimum occupancy requirement must -1. So if it's a 3-bedroom unit, you can be a household of 2. If it's a 4-bedroom unit, you can be a household of 3, and we won't require 2 dependents on that. So it is minimum occupancy -1 for that. And that's if it's a child, if it's one of your children. If it's a sibling, they have to meet the minimum occupancy, they have to qualify under the unit's category, and they have to demonstrate at least a 4-year work history prior to the request for a transfer. Again, all transfers, there'll be a $1,000 transfer fee for that. The maximum sales price will be based on the date of the transfer, and the new owner's appreciation will begin at that amount. And then the qualified buyer is also required to enter into a brand new deed restriction, an updated deed restriction. So that's the types of conveyances that are allowed outside the bid process. Are there any questions on that?
Questions on all that?
There's a lot, I know.
Dave?
So you can convey it to one of your children,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't convey it to your wife.
Well, more than likely, she's already on it. If she's not already on the,
Right.
deed,
more
well,
than
they can,
likely.
you can add, and that's adding somebody. If you're an owner, you can add them,
Yeah, that's the difference. I was
Yes.
just gonna say,
yeah.
in the title, right under eligible transfers, addition of an owner to the title needs to be put on there. It's an addition of an owner to the title. In the second section, it's not as clear, but it is a conveyance, and you use the term relinquishment, which is very legalistic, but it's eliminating, it's changing the title.
Right.
You know, the other one is adding someone to the title. This is really changing it, and the existing owner is being removed. And so that's the difference, so that you could convey it to your spouse if you're both still living there, and have her added onto the title because she never qualified work history before, now she does, or whatever. But if you were just gonna say, to a spouse who is not qualified, I'm giving you the house, I'm leaving, goodbye, I'm divorced, whatever, they would have to go through the lottery process.
Right.
Because,
They would have to get qualified.
yeah,
Makes sense.
yeah. But I think the titling in there needs to be just a
Yes,
little more
we'll
clear
add
of the
that.
distinction between those two types.
Other questions, Dave? Any questions, Francie or Rick?
You know, it's really almost
No,
like that would,
I thought it was pretty clear. Pretty good wording, it's pretty clear.
yeah.
No comment for me.
Other questions?
I'm just thinking that, as you say, B, maybe the word conveyance being the very first word is what's wrong. You know,
Okay.
it's like eliminating ownership via conveyance or something, changing ownership via conveyance. Okay, that's all. Oh, one other last thing, I did have a question on this broader issue. Overall, on all of these, starting with your chapter 1 or introduction, certain conveyances, they all will include the issuance of a new updated deed restriction.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and do
And
we,
they are all mentioned on that, but I'll make sure that that's.
that
you have
needs to
the
be
transfer
highlighted.
fee And the new deed restriction.
yes,
Yeah,
that will be current with all APCHA
Right.
guidelines at the time.
yeah.
Thank you.
There's one part that I didn't quite understand, Cindy. So if the owner passes away and it's going to a child, I thought I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the child either needs to be in education that we talked about, or have a
Right.
4-year work history. Did I understand that correctly?
And that actually, death of a qualified employee, that's the next one that we talk about that's on page 41 to 42. So we do cover
not
that,
there yet.
but that's,
We're not there
that's in a different section.
Okay, so then I don't have any questions here. So on this piece then, all out of search today. On this piece then, is there anyone who either can't support this or has requests for changes in addition to the language that Rachel has suggested?
All good.
Okay, great. Then we can bring that back at second reading with the edits that Rachel made and move on to that next piece.
Great. So it's on, well, actually, on page 41, it's just the title, death of a qualified employee. The language is actually on page 42. And it's a little bit different in rental units versus ownership units. For rental units, any approved household member in occupancy at the time of a qualified tenant's death shall be permitted to continue to occupy the respective unit for the balance of the lease term. Any such household member who meets the requirements of the applicable deed restriction and the APCHA regulations, including without limitation the minimum occupancy requirement, is entitled to a new lease for the unit as a qualified tenant. So what this means is that if you're in a 2-bedroom and the one spouse dies, you can remain in that unit until your lease is up, but then you have to readdress the occupancy. Ownership units are different because you don't have to readdress occupancy. In rental units, though, you do have to readdress the occupancy. But what we have done in our units is if somebody has to readdress that, we will allow them a priority to possibly move into a 1-bedroom, or the next rental 1-bedroom that comes up. Or to give them a little bit of time to get a roommate as well, so one or the other.
Yeah.
So that's what that means. For ownership units, a qualified spouse and her child in occupancy at the time of a qualified owner's death is not required to satisfy the requirements for the applicable category for the unit, nor the minimum occupancy requirement. This is if the child is already living in the unit. A relative other than a qualified spouse and her child who is in occupancy of the unit at the time shall be permitted to continue to occupy the respective unit only if such person is or becomes APCHA qualified within 6 months of the approved owner's death. That working is obviously, it's very important. A child of a deceased owner who was not in occupancy at the time of the qualified owner's death must meet the following requirements in order to obtain title for the unit. So if you have a child, obviously, and they're now working full-time, within Pitkin County, but they live in a rental unit. What happens is that assets and income must be at or below the requirements for a Category 5. So again, an RO person can't move into it, but if it's a Category 2 unit, they can. The applicable minimum occupancy requirements -1 again comes into play. But they may be waived if a work history of 10 consecutive years in Pitkin County prior to the point of transfer is documented. So if that person has been working in Pitkin County for 10 years and they're a household of 2 and one of their parents or their parent passes away and it's a 3-bedroom, they have the ability to move into that 3-bedroom. The child must document his or her 4-year work history in Pitkin County immediately prior to the qualified owner's death, or document that he or she was currently enrolled in a high school, college, or graduate degree program. And in order for a spouse of the qualified child to be added, but not substituted to title by a quitclaim deed or otherwise, such person must demonstrate proof of marriage as determined by APCHA. So you can't just move in a friend. You have to have that commitment. You have to provide that documentation if you want to add somebody to it. We have experienced some where somebody says, if you go ahead and add me to it, because they hear that the person doesn't really want to move into a place, and then they talk the person into, we don't know if money changed hands or anything, but they talk the person into allowing them to be on the deed. Shortly, within a year, the one person quitclaims the original owner of that unit off the property, and that's skirting the lottery system. So this really says you have to have that commitment to us, to show us that. And again, APCHA will address ownership on a case-by-case basis to ensure consistency with our regulations. We know that every situation is different, and we obviously will listen to all situations. And honestly, if something does come up that we see reoccurring, we will always bring it back to the board to see if it's something that should be added or changed in the regulations. So we try to keep track of all that stuff when somebody has a question on something or their situation is a little bit different. Usually they're an anomaly. It's once.
Yeah.
And that's it. A legal guardian of the dependent minor has the right to remain in the unit if such person is a qualified employee. Guardianship does not constitute employment, so they have to be working someplace in Pitkin County. If occupants of an APCHA ownership unit become ineligible or disqualified, such units shall be marketed and sold according to the deed restriction. And again, a new deed restriction is required during any transfer of ownership.
Yeah. Thank you, Cindy.
So that's that part. I know there's a lot.
I had one kind of maybe minor question or alteration. Way back at the beginning under the rental units, may continue to occupy the respective unit for the balance of, for the balance, no, it's okay, I didn't want to interrupt. For the balance of the lease term.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking, what if there's a sudden death and there's only 25 days left in the lease, or 30?
We would
I
take that into consideration. We
I
would extend that. I would think that we would extend it up to 6 months.
Well,
if
that's
not a little
what
bit
I
longer.
think maybe we should put it in here, or a minimum of X many days, or something, if the lease only has 45 days left in it. That's gonna be a lot of time for someone to figure out what to do and how to move, and, but, you know, the more that can be directly in here as opposed to, well, this is policy in the office when we run into these problems, the better.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
We will modify that and bring that back at second reading in public hearing.
Yeah, makes sense.
Cindy, the question I had before, maybe it's a request. So in B, subsection 3, the child must document his or her 4-year work history, ... or document. I know the intention is to capture both, but it does read as an either or. And so I wonder if, you know, someone has a 2-year work history and a 2-year school because they're 20, they've only been out of school for 2 years. As this reads, I'm not sure if they would qualify. So I'm not sure exactly how to rework that. But I don't think
We'll modify that to cover that.
Okay.
So they would both add up to at least that 4-year work history. 'Cause
Yeah,
you're right,
exactly.
If they're just finishing they graduated in 2018 or 2020, and then they started working in 2021, and you know that they're working full-time, that it would be the 4 years if they went to school for 3 years, and then that's the 4th year. We would combine those.
Yeah, I
But
just
we will
wanna-
clarify that.
Yeah, it
That
just-
if they're in school and they have at least, and they've been working, if they've graduated from school and they've been working for a year, but they all add up to at least 4 years, they would qualify. We'll clarify that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're not accidentally excluding a.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was really my only thing. Francie, Rick, did you guys have any additional questions?
No questions for me.
Me either.
Nope. Anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Then are there any other requests for alterations here? Any reasons anyone can't support this with the amendment to that section to capture those children and the small edits that Rachel had made? Okay, then we will move this forward to second
Right.
reading with those changes.
So the next one is on page 48, and it's just a small change. And this is if an owner has requested a leave of absence, and we don't see a problem in the leave of absence, but their HOA does. And usually there's a reason for it. And if you request a leave of absence, you have to be in good standing with your HOA anyway. But sometimes HOAs and owners may not get along. So this allows the owner to request a quick little hearing in front of the hearing officer, and then the HOA would have to go and say, this is the reason why. And if it's not really a valid reason, then we would accept what the hearing officer would say, no, you really should have approved their approved their leave of absence. So this allows them that avenue to go to the
Okay.
hearing officer.
Very nice.
And I'd imagine that the most often reason HOA wants to decline it is because someone is so far behind on their dues.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they have to be, and that's one of the things that, to request a leave of absence, that you have to be in good standing with your HOA.
Okay. Do we have a list of reasons why you can, or are there any that are specifically denied, like I need a sabbatical and I'm going to Europe for 6 months?
It used to be very specific.
Okay,
It used to be school or medical.
okay.
It's school or medical, or you have
Or
to take
family
care of
care.
or family care. What we have seen is people who have lived here and worked here for 15 years, they want to take a little break.
Yeah,
They might want to say, well, I'm thinking of maybe changing my career, and I want to just try this out.
Mhm.
I want to try out living over here instead of in Colorado, and but I don't know if I'm going to like it. So if they've lived here for a certain length of time, we allow that break.
Okay.
We very rarely say no.
yeah.
And there hasn't really been too many. I don't really know of a time when an HOA has specifically said no, unless
They were behind on their
yes.
dues.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a good lever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just was wondering.
Any other questions on this piece, guys? Nope.
So
Any-
the next one. So I'm hoping everybody's for that one then. But
Yeah, just to confirm, so is everyone supportive of moving that forward? Yes?
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me ask, Cindy, during a leave of absence, does your appreciation freeze?
Not the first year.
Not the first year?
If you ask for a second year, it freezes.
Okay.
And you don't gain, even if you come back after that second year, whatever you would have gotten during that period of time is taken away from your maximum sales price. What we have seen is more, I would say at least 75 to 85% of the people, if they take that second year, they're not going to come back.
They're not gonna come back?
And then it's had that much more wear and tear on the unit
Sure.
with the renter.
Yeah,
So that's also one of the reasons why we've done that as well.
okay. No, I appreciate it. I think that's the right policy. I just was wondering, and that's in here as well, so people understand that very
Yes.
clearly.
Yeah. So the next one is the special review section, and we are recommending the limitation of it because the ones that we've seen that's always asking for some type of waiver of a solid, really solid regulation of purchasing. Whether, well, I don't quite have my 4 years, but I've been doing this, or I went away for 15 years but I worked 10 years prior and I think I should have that. It's things like that and then you have people who they might have been gone 2.5 years and then they don't come at all and ask for any requests because they know what the regulations are. This is to kind of take that out. It's kind of, I don't know if I would say it's subjective, but we feel that it's more fair to the population to not allow a special review. And what we want to see is especially if we keep getting the same requests, well, I did this, so why can't I do this? And if we keep seeing them, the first thing we're going to do is say, maybe that does need to be adjusted in the regulations. We'll bring it back to the board to discuss. We'll say we've had 4 or 5 inquiries or 5 or 6 inquiries of the same thing. What do you think? Should we go ahead and add this to the regulations? And that way it's fair all the way across the board, and it's actually incorporated into the regulations. So that's how we want to see that.
Right.
We honestly, we're willing to listen to anybody. We know what the purpose is of the program. We are not heartless. We do know that there's a lot of different situations out there, and we do know if especially if there's a recurring one, it is something that maybe we do need to address in the regulations.
Thank you, Cindy. Questions on that? Rachel, thanks for the comments earlier. Any other questions? None? I guess I have one question. So I completely agree with the intent of this, and I think it will be helpful, but the thing it raises for me is, the first person who brings something forward doesn't always get the full review. Mm-hmm. And so like, are we sort of, punishing the person who made us aware of something where they don't get to benefit from the change that people after them do? And so is there any sort of like process protection for that person so that they don't miss out on the opportunity of the change because they were first?
Well, I would think that we would keep track of all the requests that we have. And honestly, if it's something that somebody brings forward where it's like, never thought of that. Maybe that is something. We might even do it on the first thing that somebody asks us. We might say, that is something that maybe we need to take to the board and discuss and bring up, that we do some type of modification to the regulations. So it is something that I believe that there's enough of all of our history in as staff that we talk about all this stuff. We don't one person just doesn't make the decision. We talk about it with, by the way, Nicole Moorhead is another one of our administrative assistants, and I meant to introduce her along with Maddie Fetter, and they're going to kind of be taking turns doing minutes. So I apologize for not introducing her earlier, because you guys have all met Maddie.
You owe her a beer.
Yeah. And they are the frontline people, and they hear everything. And honestly, it's and they've run into everything. So. It's something that I do believe that if it's something that we think, well, that doesn't make sense for us to do it that way versus this way, I believe that we would say, that's something that I think we need to talk to the board. We also tell them that they can also always come in front of public comment and bring things up to you as well. That is the first thing that we do tell them. Go to public comment. This is when we meet. That's 5 o'clock.
That's right.
Go to public comment. So we do tell them to do that as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Any additional requests for Rachel?
Well, I was going to say I really understand your comment there, Skippy, and sometimes there can be challenges with the timing of how things roll through. Particularly folks who were looking for some waiver of the requirements to bidding on units, and the bid will happen and they'll have missed it and maybe it'll change, but there will be potential bids coming up afterwards, and so it's still worth processing through a change. It's kind of like processing through some change is better than no change at all, and so we'll have to go with that. But I was going to bring up something that's kind of been in the background, and it's a little out of APCHA domain in the normal sense, perhaps, as we go forward. And I know through email exchanges maybe months ago with Tom Smith and others, they kind of ask if this is changed or things. How do we as APCHA or as a community, maybe it's not APCHA, deal with the transition that our town is really in? You know, there are people who are aging and getting close, if not past Social Security retirement, who've lived here by hook, by crook, and by their fingernails for a long time, but probably don't have a work history to prove to Cindy to be able to get into our Aspen country and senior housing. We have children who have become adult children who are disabled, and parents wondering how will they survive when we're gone. And they won't have the work history necessary to necessarily qualify in APCHA units. And how do we as a community deal with that? I've said before, is it necessary for the city to create some units that are outside of APCHA's full work history requirement, everything like that? You know, there's an ongoing effort, which I'm not a part of, so I can't pretend to be up to speed on it, about how to deal with the community homelessness issues. And what should we do for them? Should it be a new tent city somewhere? And a lot of our homeless people work. I mean, I saw a lot of them working night shifts over at the market. And so I just don't know where or when we do that. But you know, and I guess I'm using the example, I have a younger brother who is mentally ill. And that became apparent during his high school years and really kind of blossomed after he was 18 or 19. And my father died early, and my brother Bob was an attorney and kind of took over on these things. But James was able to be on my father's Social Security disability because he had been identified before he was 18, and my father had the work history. And that's how that system works. But I kind of have wondered, what do we do with the handicapped children of our own community as they become adults and no longer have parents to take care of them? Is our community have a place for that? Have we created something for that? And so that's the only thing that special review might have had a small part in the future, because I had emailed Tom, our attorney, asking about such cases, you know, and maybe they're rare and maybe they're real. And how do you, as a community, as an agency that's overseeing affordable housing, whose taxes passed to fund it never mention the word workforce. They talk about community housing and affordable housing. So that's the only thing that I have thought, you know, again, in emailing Tom, what will we do with this circumstance? And he wrote back, well, hey, they wouldn't even get special review anyhow because they're not qualified. You know, this is just totally outside of our realm and our prism of looking at community issues. So I think that is something that we really need to address at some point as a community, whether it's within APCHA's role or not. But that's the only part that bothers me about losing special review is I would hate to tell people who I know who've been, you know, working, and whether it's been, you know, under the table or just house sitting or this or that, but they've been here as long as I have, and they,
If you're working
you know,
under the table, you're not paying taxes. We're still subsidized by taxes.
Yeah.
I have an issue if somebody's
yeah,
paying under the table.
I understand that
Yeah.
entirely, Cindy. I'm just saying maybe it's not even being paid under table, it's just trade. You know, maybe it's somebody, you know, getting room and board for taking care of someone's lawn. There's been weird situations in this town for a long time, and I don't
And
want to see
again,
people freezing on the streets in the future.
I still think it would be something that we would listen to and see, is there a way that this can somehow work within our regulations or bring something to you guys to talk about.
Yeah.
We are working with senior services, just to let you know, with regards to some of the people who are qualified seniors. They just don't have a lot of the paperwork. Our Aspen Country Inn has a senior priority, and they let us know when they have somebody who they they
Think.
know and that would qualify for the housing. So we ask for certain documentation, but we don't go far back like what we have done. So we are working with senior services as well. We did move somebody in that way, and we're working with somebody else right now too.
Okay, hey, that's great, because, you know, I know it's been an issue in the past, and not that it's been your guys causing it. It's a lack of paperwork that people have. And the other thing, I guess, is that, you know, it was a while ago when someone was struggling to find the work history of a potential resident of the country inn, but the company she'd worked for had gone bankrupt and
Right.
closed, and how the heck do you get your, you know, old work? But we can get that through the IRS and things like that to help people who don't keep their paperwork very well. That's all.
Right.
Thank you very much
Great.
for letting me go on.
Francie?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question about succeeding staff. I mean, because Cindy and Diane, it's really obvious that you're going to bring a lot of empathy to each case and hear people out, and you say, well, we would consider that, we would consider that. But if it's not in the policy, and you're replaced by people who aren't so empathetic, it might change. So I guess I'm just saying in general that kind of the things that Rachel brought up and different things that have come up that are exceptional cases or whatever, it might not be bad to codify some of those just to protect that process. I mean, we have a new director coming in, and he's not going to have a history with not just this housing, but really any housing. And so I'm just suggesting that we make sure that we codify things that are at all going to be, yes, well, we'll take care of that, but it may not be the same we in 10 years. So.
Right, we'll try to
make
start
sense?
keeping track of that too.
Yeah, and I'd also ask, I don't know, Diane, if you have anything to offer, but Francie, before you were elected and appointed, and we were lucky enough to have you here, you know, we did go through a strategic planning process and a work planning, and part of that was identifying core pillars and values for how the board and the organization would run, and those included things like compassion, like equity, like inclusion. But I guess I'm not super clear on you know, the word codify, right, or direct that you use. So Diane, can you maybe speak to, you know, does that enshrine some of those principles and practices, or is there another level of codification, for lack of a different word, that we may consider at some point?
You know, there's, like many things, there's not one clear answer on this. I think what Cindy talked to is a concept called administrative discretion, and that is that we work within the lines, and in those areas where they're borderline, to use a baseball analogy, we use the tie goes to the runner, right? And I think the only reason that we don't recommend at this point codifying something that's happened once or twice is simply because it all of a sudden the regulations start to become become overwhelming to work with, to address one or two situations that come up every 5 years or something like that. I think what Cindy has suggested, whereas we can start to track those exceptions, right? And one example is with you're just talking about leave of absence. With COVID, there was a greater flexibility in leave of absence that we probably wouldn't generally want. However, given it's adjusting to those circumstances. So I do think Cindy's recommendation is, you know, hey, let's start to track what those are. And if it looks like there are things that are coming up more frequently than once or twice every 5 years, then we can codify it. But again, just like, you know, with a recent property that we came to agreement on about that had some water damage, those are the kind of things we have the ability to work with on a staff level. So if you're okay with us taking that approach, that'd be fine. The other approach we can take is, hey, the board can say, I want to tackle this section of dealing with unusual cases of disability within a time frame of X years, we could bring that back as a regulation, as an alternative. Thanks.
Thanks, Diane.
Oh, well, that makes a lot of sense, and definitely the way Cindy worded it about tracking things makes a lot of sense too. I was thinking about the last meeting. I think it was our last meeting, maybe the meeting before last, where we spent quite a bit of time talking about exceptions. But what about in this case, and what about in that case? So, I mean, I totally trust you guys to, make the right decisions and act appropriately and compassionately. I just hope it continues to be I hope we continue to have you kinds of people.
Yeah, and yesterday I reminded Cindy that she can retire 10 years from today. And every week when I talk to her, the clock resets.
I don't want to be 80 and still working here.
But you want to be 80.
Yes. That's better. That's a better way to put it.
Okay.
It is a point well taken, and Cindy and Bethany and I, we have a standing meeting. I won't be able to do it tomorrow, but we actually go through our notes from every board meeting and talk about what did we agree to do at that board meeting. So I'm updating my notes right now, and I'm going to also send an email on this one because we won't be meeting tomorrow. But we'll make sure we get. Cindy is the master of storing tracking devices on our city drive, and so we'll most definitely get that done because that is important. And you are right. Right, people do change over time, and in Colorado, you could say you might win the lottery.
And the only other thing the only other thing that I can say is that we are a unique community, that we have such a robust affordable housing program, but we still cannot attend to everybody's needs. We just don't have the resources to do that. So there is a time where you have to pick and choose as to what is the mission of providing employee housing versus people who do not work here and need help. We are a little bit different, and that's one of the things that we do tell other people who say, well, how can you get away with that? It's like, we are a different type of housing authority. Yeah. We're not your normal housing authority. We're not subsidized by the federal government or the state government. We are subsidized by the city and the county. And then they go, oh, now I understand. Yeah. So that also is something that I wish we could do it all. But we just
Cindy,
can't.
I fully understand that.
Yeah.
That's why I was saying it's something that the city council or the city working with the county would have to do and think about what is the right size and what is the right appropriateness. And it wouldn't be governed by the exact same set of guidelines we have here. It like I said, it's tangential to APCHA,
Right.
but it perhaps is not APCHA overall to be all those things. But we have used tax credits for some of our projects, so some things are a little subsidized.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Francie, does that sit well with you? Does that satisfy
Yes,
your
absolutely.
question? Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Thank you. Rick, anything to add on this?
No, it's been an interesting conversation, and I fully support all of these questions being raised.
Okay.
Thanks.
Dave, any final thoughts?
No, yeah, I think it's, I really appreciate what staff does in these kinds of situations. I think it's excellent, and congrats to you guys for working that hard.
Thank you. Rachel, any last thoughts on the regulation changes?
no.
Okay.
And the only other one, just to let you know, is just to clarify the 10 years in the definition.
Yeah.
So on page 62 of the regulations and 87 of the packet, it clarifies that now you need at least a 10-year consecutive work history. So that was the last change of this go around. So hopefully everybody's okay with that. We can do a motion to move this forward with the changes suggested.
Okay.
And bring that back on September 1st for second reading and public hearing.
Okay.
That's great. Take a motion.
I would make if we're doing this the way we do in the city, first we make a motion to read, and then we follow it with a motion to approve first reading. So I would make a motion for first reading of proposed APCHA regulation number 6, series of 2021, adopting amendments to the Aspen Pitkin County Employee Housing Program.
I second that emotion.
Okay. So I don't know who does the reading here, or if we actually read something.
I haven't read
we haven't.
we've never read it in before. We've
Oh,
always
okay.
just done that and.
Okay, well,
that
let me
specific
try it.
name.
I would say this is a first reading over the removal of special review regulations, defining more clearly transfers outside of the bid process, limiting the applicants for future for sale lotteries to only bid up one category, and a modification of retirement and disability work histories are what we're discussing. So I'll modify my motion to approve on first reading resolution number 6, series of 2021.
Great.
Rick's
You
turn.
accept that, that amendment?
Yes,
Just a
absolutely.
second. Okay, so any further discussion before a vote? Rick, did you have something you wanted to add?
Nope.
No. Okay. Then I'll just add for the record that these things may seem small, but this is how we improve our system incrementally. We add more accountability, more fairness, and we make it work better for everyone living in it and who hopes to live in it. And so these are important changes, and they will come back. They'll have an opportunity for public comment again on, what's the date?
September 1st.
September 1st. With that, Cindy, I'll ask you to read the roll.
Okay. David,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
Francie,
Yes.
Rachel.
Yes.
Great. Those will come back. Second reading, September 1st. Thank you very much.
Great.
And with that, we will move down to draft work plan discussion. I think we have a look at last year's and next year's.
Unmute. So I swear, like in a couple of years, I'm going to get really good with those buttons. Let me pull up. I think let me double check the agenda. I think we're a little bit ahead of schedule.
We are, which we accept.
Okay, so my initial intention was to just walk you through the 2021 work plan. I think what I'd like to do instead is take you through what you have in your packet, and I won't read to you, but I'll give you, thank you, Maddie. That's even better than me sharing, so thank you. I think what I'd like to do is take you through, and I won't read, but take you through these one by one and maybe add a little color commentary from the 2021 work plan, and then talk about the 2022. Can everyone read that? Does that work? Because I do have slides for each of these.
Yes.
Works for me.
Yep.
Okay, great. No, Maddie, that's great. That's great. Like you had it the last one. Yep, great. So I can see the current status. First and foremost, thank you for the time that you gave us to allow us to implement Home Track. I was in high tech for 22 years and mostly systems integration, and I've never seen such a good launch. And that is, I have very little to do with it. It was the APCHA team, and it would shock you to see that it was the entire APCHA team. And I'll give you 2 examples. There's one is that everybody on the team had a part of the system that they needed to do quality testing on, and also give feedback on, make changes. So there were meetings every week that every single person at APCHA was in a home check meeting every week, if not multiple. And I also just love the work that Maddie and Nicole did on, I approached them in November and said, hey, we need a help desk. And they made it happen and exceeded my expectations as far as not only having FAQs and help items, but also having videos that are that have a voiceover on them. And it was extraordinary. So thank you for that. As always, we're always looking every week. There are improvements that are made to the system and tweaks that are made. However, it's been a really stable system and a good launch. Thank you also for your trust in us in increasing the budget on that front. And number 3, Slate Communications was a good partner on that front, and we developed a number of pieces. We're actually working on the affidavit now. I think we're at about a 70% response rate is what I saw from Andrew yesterday. And we're moving into the phase, Cindy, Andrew, and I met yesterday with Slate Communications, and we'll be moving into the phase where we do directed postcards to folks who haven't responded on the affidavit. And remember, this year we've added to the affidavit information about who's in the household. So, for example, we'll be able to produce data on how many homes have 4 bedrooms and 1 person living in it. And we do have situations like that, sometimes because someone passed away and left it to a child, for example.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Diane, hold on. Rachel has a question, if you don't mind her jumping in.
Diane, it's just slipped my mind, but does everybody requalify every year, or is it every 2 years on a
2 years.
every 2 years? Okay.
It's every 2.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, biennial affidavit.
I've done mine this year. Forgot.
We'll also probably do door hangers as well. So because we know what properties haven't responded, and it's a legal responsibility to respond to the affidavit.
Yeah.
To affirm that you are still legally in that property. And I mentioned the help desk. So let me move my screen around so I can read. There we go. Thanks. So regulations, I'll take this one as a group. I think it was particularly helpful in January that Bethany came to you with these regulations in categories of, hey, these ones are wording, and you adopted those really quickly. These ones are kind of inside baseball that it's going to be really hard to explain to the public. And as the APCHA board, you are representatives of the public. And while we will have public hearings, we recommended you take those on. There were other ones that we got some feedback on. So I that marked as in process and some completed. On capital reserves, as you know, we had some preliminary discussions and then put those on hold. Maddie, can you scroll down for me to, and actually you'll see on capital reserves that I moved most of this just to next year and added some comments to that. On compliance, we had that discussion in January, and I think we've largely, we got board feedback, and we continue every 2 weeks to have compliance meetings and compliance cases that Bethany and Tom are working through. Maddie started to help some on those. As you know, we're on GrassRoots. Now we're getting into part of the work plan that I take responsibility for. Actually, I did not review this every month as I should have, and that will change. And we may want to do that with the whole board. We were very focused on home track, but that's not, that explains why I didn't get to these items, but hindsight being 2020 should have. So we haven't started a community engagement plan, although we do meet with Slate Communications every 2 weeks. And I'll tell you, some of my favorite documents that were produced this year were the owner's guide and the buyer's guide. And actually, recently, I was talking with Bennett Bramson, and he's started a new Roaring Fork roommates and rentals page that's kind of not real estate agents, et cetera. And he's posted those on that page. So getting the word out, as well as we absolutely need to get those translated into Spanish and be communicating more in Spanish. One of the questions that Andrew is talking to Revision about is, if we do go to a WordPress front end, will we be able to have automatic translation of the community portion of Home Trek into Spanish? Fee study, haven't even started that. So before I move on to 2022, are there questions, comments on the 2021, the
21.
21 work plan? Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I was thinking about something. The one thing on that, the not started list of the APCHA fee schedule, I thought it could have been a little more focused, and the one I had thought was just whether we were getting appropriate staff time for development reviews and for some of the other things. I don't know if we were talking about raising the fee schedule for applying for a lottery or some of the more basic activities of APCHA, but it was more some of the staff work where we were seeing committed to other obligations was not being fairly compensated. And so I don't know if maybe that got expanded into a bigger realm, or maybe my impression was wrong, but I was just thinking that that was something we were talking about when we were fudging with budgets and how to do budgets better and how to create a little more revenue and make sure we weren't being shorting ourselves on our services. So I just was going to add a little more definition to that maybe, especially since we're going into budget season and we're thinking about next year, it was going to be minor at best anyhow in terms of new revenue, but that was part of what I thought that one was.
Yeah, and Cindy, do you want to comment on how much time, because you'd be really the person who spent time on development review.
And it really depends on what it is. Because there's one out there right now that I've got to actually spend some time on, and it's providing a recommendation on the Gorsuch property up by Lift 1.
Exciting.
So, yeah. So, but that is something that I can look at, and I can look at what is charged now and see about what some of these do take. Usually what has happened is it's been left in the hands of the community development department in the past to look at this and kind of put down, well, maybe this should be increased. So I think it is something that I will look at within the next couple of days and see if it's something that needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I don't think, however, Cindy, I think this one about APCHA fee study is more related to understanding, because that is not it is, I think, relative to your workload, a de minimis amount of time is spent on development review.
Right.
I think it really is about regular APCHA fees, and this may be one that the board just says, let's pull it off the table. I was not here the last time that fees were discussed, but it's my understanding that there may not be an appetite to change fees.
Yeah. If it's okay. I seem to remember there were some questions that came up, and one of those fees has now been, was in our meeting today, and that was the $1,000 fee for transfer. That didn't used to be as much as $1,000.
No, it was actually 100.
It was 100. So
Yeah.
that was one fee that we did address that we thought could be done, as a one-off without doing a real study. And, it's not, I hate to say it this way, it's not so much, quote, Cindy's time now. It's the fact that we've invested 30 years worth of training into Cindy, and her time is worth $1,000 an hour in my estimation. And so it was more the task, and are we delivering a service to people at a kind of a loss? And we don't want to be losing money on it, because sometimes after all that research is done, she's still got to go to a city council meeting or something like that and present the results at times, or explain the results and sit there for 2 hours until that item's called up. So, I don't know that there's appetite for raising the lottery entry fees, or we've just gone through the fine schedule. That was a new fee thing. So I think it was limited, and maybe that's something internal, Diane, for you and Cindy and Bethany to all talk about and say, are there distinct fees that we think are too low for the work we're doing? And do it, as we see them as problem areas, rather than try to, do a huge study or something.
Thanks, Rachel. Anything else from anyone else on this one? No. So Diane, I do have something on this. I was really excited to see this come back. The sort of checking our homework, I think is really awesome. This board over the last year has kind of constantly circled back to this question about how do we tell our story, get ahead of this. The public discussion and not just be reactionary to things that perhaps can be perceived negatively. I think this is a great opportunity to do this. So this is a great start. I'd love to see a version of this filled in that's really intended for the public, that's really intended for the press as a means for us to tell our story in an honest, organic way about what we're working on. So I don't need to go through all the things here. But just as examples, I'm looking at, community engagement, right? Tactic number 2, develop a led community engagement. And internally, it just has not started because we know we haven't gotten to the meat of this work, right? But the reality is we had board discussions about what community engagement looked like. We had discussions about what level of community participation we wanted in various things and various regulations. We checked in with the public on what they wanted to be involved in. We split up that stuff into multiple tiers. We prioritized that work, and then we started doing that work. We want to keep it short, right? Because the public isn't going to read anything long and verbose. But I think there's an opportunity to go through this and fill this in such a way that we're really kind of telling the story of what we worked on. And then we can share that proactively with the press and with the public. And perhaps over time this can live on the website, and we don't have to update it on a daily rolling basis, but maybe once a quarter we update it. So someone in the public who's interested in how we're doing better accountability can just go to a page on the website and see oh, that's the plan for this year, and that's the box that we checked off, and they're still getting there.
Yeah.
So I think there's a good opportunity here.
Yeah, I think more engagement.
That's a great idea, Skippy. I'm very supportive of that idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So that's all I wanted to add, and then I guess we can turn it over to 2022 already. These years are going by at a very concerning clip.
Holy cow.
And Maddie, for this one, can you unshare? I'm gonna take over on this one because I want to do this one as a living document. Let me grab mine real quickly. Hey, look at that. I love when they make improvements to, Zoom has recently made an improvement so it shows you which screen you're actually pulling up.
Yes, that's nice.
Anyway, one kind of, so I do think that this version here is probably, I mean, the only more simple we can get on here is to say, we're working on home track regulations, et cetera. I did, in our staff meeting the other day, and yesterday, I mentioned our work plan. And one of the things I pointed out is that, upwards of 90, probably greater % of what APCHA does every day is not on this work plan. Right? Work plans are generally
just say
about
Cindy in big letters.
Yeah.
Right, and so the in fact I can bring it up at some point, but I did for City Council at their retreat. Just kind of here's a little bit what the blood and guts of APCHA is. All right, where the other part, and I want to be really careful about how I say this, but at the end of the day, a lot of people are not interested in what administrative work looks like. Right? It's APCHA does it well. APCHA takes a lot of pride in doing it, but for a lot of people, program administration is not kind of maybe the coolest thing that they've ever seen.
Yeah.
So I want to keep expectations in check about what the work of making sure that if we're going to talk about the work of APCHA, that we just don't talk about, well, APCHA did home track this year. Well, actually, that was actually a small portion about. That's what's new and different about what we did this year.
Diane, Rachel has a question
anyway,
or something.
Yeah, please.
Diane, I want to thank you for just bringing that forward and stating it as you did. It's too easy for us who are thinking about policy improvements or these things to forget about the day-to-day. And I think that perhaps part of doing this as we reported to the BOCC or the city council of this is our 2022 work plan and this is our budget request, is if possible, and maybe if it's not possible this year, for next year, to be able to say, we requalified X many renters for their rental units. We sold over X many homes and had qualified X many individuals as being eligible to participate in those lotteries. We did, we did X amount of customer engagement with people who either did rent with us, didn't rent with us, or just got information about the town with us. It's just the stats of the daily work that need to happen. We did X many development reviews for the year. I mean, just really kind of think about, we moved into a new office this year. We did, so I think that beginning to make the significance of the day-to-day work real to all the rest of us would be a way to go at that. And then add it to the work plan, that we're going to continue to have excellent customer service and the appropriate staffing to do so. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that idea, Rachel. I think, kind of new to all this, but sitting on the BOCC and having somebody bring this forward about sort of in-house things would not be as powerful a report to me as hearing what Rachel just suggested. I think that would be immensely helpful, not just the BOCC, but also the public, whoever's watching that. And I think it's a great idea, Rachel. I really support that.
I mean, there's so much. We've managed the property maintenance of X many units. We've overseen which major repair jobs this year, that sort of thing. We handled X many evictions.
On the fire panel at T2, and they needed us to do 24-hour watch.
Yeah, I would throw any other, we got the bear out of the laundry room at Truscott, I mean, add a few extras in there for fun.
And Diane, just to let you know, Diane did suggest for the budget review that we're going to be bringing to council, we are going to put some of those numbers in it.
Okay,
so,
yeah, I'd put as many as you can because the public needs to know them as much as us.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Rachel, and Diane, I think in large measure you're right. Like if the garbage gets picked up, not everyone cares how it gets picked up, but I do think that there's a big change that we've seen in broader society about how people process things, right? Like the metaphor that I like is, back in the day, if you wanted a fancy meal, you wanted to go to your white tablecloth restaurant, you order your thing, and that's it. You just wanted that meal to be really perfect for your time out. And that's not what people want anymore. People want to watch Top Chef. They want kitchens where they can see into them. Yeah. They do want to know how the food is
made
prepared, and there's an interest in that. And that's part of where people generate trust from, which is something we talk about a lot. The caveat to that, though, is no one is watching the uninteresting cooking shows, too. So to Rachel's point about the bear, the reason people listen to the police department's social media is because they're really funny. Yeah. So we're not going to get it perfect the first time, but I think as we put things out there, it's not in this course of list building and pedantry. It's making it engaging as well.
Yeah, very good.
Excellent.
Rachel, thank you for bringing that up, and thank you to the rest of the board for your unanimous support of this. With Slate Communications, we did yesterday talk a little bit about having them do an infographic on APCHA by the numbers. And Rachel, I appreciate. I've got notes on all of these, and because I think that's where I agree. That's where it comes to life, and that. Plus what we'll be bringing to the board in September, what Andrew Miller will be bringing to the board, that's a lot of people don't know how many units does APCHA have, how many are rentals, how many are ownership, how many are 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, how many retirees live in units, how many people, how many units have extra bedrooms, right? There's a lot of that. It's that quantifying what we do and quantifying the program, the underlying program numbers. I really like this approach because it's a not making stuff up. It's like, here's how many maintenance calls our perennially understaffed maintenance department, which if you know anyone who wants a maintenance job, we really need someone, and the city has excellent benefits.
Did you say it was over a year, Diane, that we've had that position? I don't, yeah.
Technically, we had someone for 1 week, but
Great.
that didn't, yep.
All right.
What do you mean by maintenance job? Like what?
Maintenance tech too.
Property, Cindy, why don't you describe it?
Well, it's our a maintenance technician 2 position, and we managed over 300 units, and we have a property management crew of 3 maintenance workers and 1 supervisor as well. And we've had a maintenance tech 2 position open since before August of last year. The person who we had is now a police officer for the city, so he didn't leave Aspen, he just left the department and went
Somebody
to.
stole him.
Yeah, somebody stole him, so.
Police are stealing?
But it's hard to find somebody because they're on call every 3 or 4 weeks. They have to shovel snow. We turn over apartments. We turn over Mesirow twice a year, and we take pride in our work because the properties that we manage are owned by the city. I don't think we get the complaints that some of the other complaints that we hear from Castle Ridge, Centennial, and stuff about management, because we are a public entity and we work for the city, and so the city council would get a lot of the complaints. So we do the best that we can with the maintenance of those. And that crew of 3 now have been doing an excellent job of keeping up on that. But it has been really hard to fill that position.
Thank you.
Very good.
Because for one thing, they're on
Yeah,
call every
thanks a
3 or
lot.
4 weeks, so they have to be within a certain length of time when you're on call.
Yeah.
And somebody's locked out. If they're 45 minutes away, that person might be out in the snow for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
Thanks.
Oh.
Not good.
Not good. Diane, does that give you the feedback on this that you were looking for?
It does, on last year's plan. I would like to run through this year's plan. The reason I want to go through it is that as we're going into the budget process, Cindy and I actually are bringing Bethany along this year too, because she's never been through the budget process at the city. We will be presenting this as part of the budget, and even though we won't bring this back to you until probably September for formal adoption, because we will be presenting this to internally and also then to the county. I want to make sure it's what you want it to be. And this year, one of the things that Sarah has asked is that we include outcomes, and that's not in your packet. Cindy and I were doing some budget prep, and so I've added some outcomes as well. So I don't want, I'll take this by section. I don't want to read these to you. However, I do, if we've got the time, I'd love to grab some feedback on this. And we probably won't have the APCHA team one in the board adopted one, but I wanted to recognize that this is going to be a big change year from a staffing perspective.
Dan, if you're not going to go through and read each one, maybe it'd be easier, because we've all read this in the packet. Maybe we can just go around the horn and take comments from each member, and then you can include them and bring something back. Would that work for you?
Yeah, maybe do it by section. So does anyone have any feedback on the APCHA team section?
I just have a question about when is the new executive director coming on? I forget.
October.
October 13th. And he's in Kenya and Tanzania right now on safari with family. Long planned family trip, including multiple sections of their family. He will be coming out either the week of the September 1st board meeting or the second board meeting, so he'll just to come out and kind of get oriented and then hit the ground running mid-October.
And then what will your position be called then?
Assistant
I'll
city
just
manager of the city.
Old
Leftover.
I think you're old hands leftover.
Transition manager.
I will still have a role in APCHA, and Sarah has specifically asked me to, especially with Home Trek, because I do have a technology background, to stay involved with that as well. And you know, I'm attached to this team, so I will. We talked yesterday about how I'm going to have to make sure to not be as physically present as I am, even though I'm all over the city right now. But to make space for Matthew in his new role. But I will be very involved in APCHA, and in fact, on things like you know, when we come to capital repairs and looking at HOA capital reserves, I expect to be very involved, just as a past assistant city manager was.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So does anyone on this
Thank you.
APCHA team portion have any changes or questions that they would like to see? Rachel.
I guess it's harder for me looking at this as just three things, you know.
Yeah.
That's why it sounds so much more to me, you know. I like the simplified approach, and I'm not saying to make it so burdensome, but I can only imagine that the APCHA team is constantly getting certain additional trainings that they need or certifications for licensing. They're constantly, you know, improving their approach and with the public and things like that. So I just am not sure that the way these are listed to me doesn't make it sound like it's really limiting as to what we're expecting going forward. So I guess maybe it's even just the word tactic as opposed, you know, it's just something. And I'm not going to get in the way of any of this. As much as anything, I just think it needs to be amplified a little more or talk about it, because I mean, I'm sitting here looking at regulations, and it looks like we have only 2 regulations we're going to look at for next year, as opposed to continuing to review and improve the responsiveness of the regulations to community needs or to create greater transparency. It just feels, if I saw that, I'd say, so you guys only have 2 regulations to talk about in 2022, you know? So like on Home Track, the one I would add to that is something along the line of public demonstrations and introductions to Home Track for the non-APCHA user. I want the business community to be as proud of Home Track as we are and as APCHA users are, and to understand why we've made this, $500,000 investment with APCHA money over the past few years. You know, I wasn't banging that drum much before because I wanted the rollout to be good and to make sure we've been able to work out the bugs. But yeah, Home Track.
Rachel, can you just,
Yeah.
Diane, is this okay? She was asking to go section by section, and I see her jumping around to take notes. So I just want to make sure she's
know.
capturing
Okay.
everything you're saying.
No, I'm only jumping around because it is my greater point. I just felt that each one of these is so lean and thin that it sounds limiting to a work product for next year.
Yeah, I just want her to be able to capture your
Okay,
points
yeah,
is
okay.
all. So I was just giving her
Hey,
a
I'm
little
on
pause
tape.
to it's true.
Sorry, and I'm leaving town in minutes.
And Rachel,
Do you have to leave
I
early?
very much,
Go ahead, Diane.
Rachel, I appreciate what you. Sorry.
Go ahead, Diane.
Rachel, I very much appreciate what you're saying. I think a lot of what you're talking about may be us revisiting the strategic plan and updating some of the objectives. So this, if you'll go back to last year, I actually presented the strategic plan with the objectives, and the reason for these tactics was because you had strategies, objectives, and tactics, and the waterfall. Yet a work plan, by definition, needs to be specific to what are the specific things you're tackling. So I think it may be that we want to revisit kind of some of the higher level and matching that to some of the communications that you just talked about regarding, and actually we'll want to add that one down here too around community engagement, is sharing what APCHA does, that I'm just calling APCHA by numbers, for right now. So I very much appreciate that. This by necessity needs to be tactical, and it's tying the budget to what our objectives are, and then how did we achieve those objectives.
Okay, yeah, and that's fine. I just maybe it was in isolation is where it came out, but I think there's probably some things that are simply ongoing that should be within some of these things, and I just think they should be fleshed out a little more. That's all. And it's more of the language, of, again, I'd go back to regulations, and you've already got it captured, but it's not to make it sound like we only have two things to contemplate. We have regulations on resale, on HOA requirements, on all sorts of things. We have a year worth of policy making. And so that was it. It just seemed lean, and I think by fleshing it out a little more, to sound like the full work plan, because again, the APCHA team is going to be continuing excellent customer service with over 5,000 contacts a year, or whatever it is, type of thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And in that sense, that is something that has been very specific to the city, called goals and outcome measures, that are different than a work plan.
Okay, see, I might be confusing the two.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to, at the work plan level, keep it higher level and focused on what's different. Rick?
Yes, Diane, I'm sorry. With all due respect to everybody, I am fading very quickly, and I'm not sure I can contribute much more tonight, and I was hopeful that you would excuse me from the rest of this meeting.
We were lucky to have you for the first half, Rick. Get some rest.
Thank you, Rick. Take care.
Rick,
Thank
feel
you
free,
all.
if you have any other thoughts that you want to include but don't have the energy now, you can email those in to the rest of us.
Well, I do have one, and I hope no one's offended by this, but and forgive my ignorance, but I'm not sure of the protocols of what retirement looks like for me, and when and if that ever happens. Does anybody have any idea?
You mean retirement from this board?
Oh.
Yes.
I was like, what?
Rick, I do.
Yeah.
Rick, I do. I've been working even today, exchanging emails with with Charlotte Anderson at the county and with Nicole Henning. We're just trying to work out the actual appointments. The city council and BOCC have completed their interviews, and so we're just trying to figure out when the actual appointment happens. So we're trying to make that happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah, terrific. It's only because I would like to make a few, adios comments to everyone, and I hope I get that opportunity at the next meeting.
You will.
Oh, absolutely.
You definitely will.
Okay,
and
God bless.
we want to give you a few adios drinks, Rick, when you're well enough.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
you,
Thanks,
Rick.
Rick. Get some rest. Great. Okay, so
Real quick, and also Rachel, I did just want to tell you, to your point about staff training, et cetera, we are absolutely working on that. And in addition to that, Cindy and Bethany and I are in the process of developing a internal staffing strategic plan, and we've got a meeting with Courtney DeVito at the city at the end of the month. We've drafted quite a large document that talks about positions, training, development, those types of things. And for example, Maddie's going to be working on her real estate license so she can be a backup for Pam, because right now Cindy is the only backup for Pam on the sales side. So we will be looking at that for all staff.
thanks, Diane. Okay, so nothing else from APCHA team. Anything else from Home Track from anyone? Francie? No?
Rachel, I put the piece about communications about Home Track under community engagement.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. And I'll clean this up and we'll be bringing it back to you.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on the regulation box here? No? Francie?
I got this note, and that's a very good point.
Yeah, and to that one, Diane, seeing no other thoughts, just pulling from our long-term agenda, the other three big buckets that we are intending to take up in 2022 are OAZ, right sizing, affordability standards. So I think those should be called out.
And HOA reserves?
I think that's the box below.
Oh, okay.
It is in there, and I have it in my notes, but she has it as a
It's on
separate
box.
box.
That's fine with
Yeah.
me, fine with me.
Yeah. Okay. Any additional thoughts on the community engagement piece?
Sounds great.
Francie, good.
No,
Okay.
nothing for me on that.
Capital repairs.
I can tell you, the more, we've got a draft to bring back for you to start to look at in September. The more we learn about this, the more this is a big deal. It's gonna be tough, and we're gonna tackle it.
Yeah.
Diana.
It's pretty understated. I would say it's understated.
Yeah.
It looks very clean and crisp, and oh, this is going to happen, boom, boom, boom. But I agree with you that it's really, really, really important, and maybe flesh it out just a little bit, Diane, so that because there's some big decisions and stuff about how to do that.
Yeah.
It just looks so short compared to how big it is.
Rachel.
Yeah, that's a great point, Francine. And, you know, we have the outcome of greater program stability, which is clear for absolutely all of these. But for me, both capital repairs and HOA capital reserves are tied up with questions of fairness, equity, and first turns. And so, you know, that's really what we're going to be seeking, fairness among the people who've owned for 5 years, people who've owned for 45 years, and the fairness of the first turn, and equity going forward. I mean, it's just, it's a lot there, as Francine was saying.
Yeah. And Diane, on this one, I know we're kind of like rebranding, so to speak, standards for sellers into capital repairs, because that's what it is. I do find capital repairs versus capital reserves very confusing, and I could see people accidentally mixing them up. So if there's a way to get at the big difference is internal versus external, individual versus development-wide. So if there's a better way to title that so they're not so confusing, I think it would be
Yeah.
helpful. I don't need that right now, but just.
Yeah, I would asterisk that to keep thinking about, because for me, I kept hearing capital reserves being used for both things. And so we
Yeah.
got to the word of capital repairs. But maybe it's sellers standards for.
Capital improvements?
No, capital improvements mean you're doing something brand new. Repair is taking care of the old thing.
Internal
So-
repair, capital reserves. I don't know.
We can leave it up there for a little while, but I think Skippy's point is good. Stellar's standards for maintenance and capital repairs. You know, for maintenance and capital repairs.
Yeah, and I think, Dan, when we think about tactics here, you know, we're really doing a couple things if we're trying to keep it in broad categories, right? We're setting a new standard. We are requiring the bringing it up to standard before the sale, and then we hope to later on create a team or a mechanism to do that in a cost fair way, right? I mean, those are kind of the three
I know.
big things that maybe could be called out in tactics.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge. I was going to say, if you save those pictures of that 40-year-old Hunter Creek unit that just sold for $156,
Yeah.
and say, why weren't they required to have this, you know?
Yeah.
And that next buyer who just bought it for that price, and what we tell them what they must fix before they sell it. I mean, it's this.
Yes, and without getting
it's
into
a chain
the
of ownership
yeah,
issues.
yeah, and without getting
No.
back into that, like we are setting the floor for them, so it won't be their lunch. But yes, you're right.
Yeah, I mean that is the fundamental,
Yeah,
you know, best
Francie?
example.
Yeah, I just wanted, this goes back to what I was saying. I remember I was sitting out on my deck at the time saying this. I don't remember when it was, but it was about the thing, it goes back to the thing of voluntary inspections as compared to required inspections. So I just somehow I'd like to show that when we're talking about repairs, these major repairs, maybe we call them major repairs, I don't know, but that we don't wait 20 years until it's time to sell it and the person selling it can't afford to make the repairs and nobody who wants to buy it can afford. So I would love to have that not go away from the discussion, that whole thing of required inspections on, I don't know, every 5 years or something, I don't know. Do you understand what I'm talking about, Diane?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Diane, you get the general.
We're talking about frequency.
Yeah. Diane, do you have enough here to, I mean, I think you understand what we're going for and you can bring something back.
Yes, and actually, Francie, I'm glad you brought that up because it also goes to the voluntary inspection part of this program, which we do have in the draft where we've kind of tried to detail this program out. I've got a page for, and there's a voluntary piece of this, and it may be that the board revisits the question of every 5-year inspections. I will say it's as much as I find the implementation and in this market finding contractors who want to do this work, although Forrest was actually encouraging about there may be some segments of the market that could be interested in depending on how we structure it. He had some ideas on that front. As daunting as that is, I do think the question of how do we pay for that, those first turn, remember, at least how we've got it proposed now, somebody who's lived there for 5 years, if we implement it as it's written right now, wouldn't be financially responsible for if it was $200,000 because they wouldn't have gotten that much appreciation. Yeah. So, but how do we pay for that first turn, as Rachel reminded me of what we're calling it, at least for now, as a working term, that is still going to be the most challenging part of this.
Yeah.
And it's not that we're, we, Cindy and Skippy and I were doing a prep meeting earlier this week, and we were going to kind of throw that on this agenda, and then it was like, no, we've got too much, and I did really want to make sure we brought this, we gave you a flyby on this.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, questions?
No, I think that's great. Any other questions on this one?
No.
Okay. Moving on to exterior HOA capital reserves. Anything to add on this? The one thing I think, Diane, might be worth calling out is, the board is very eager to take this on, and we've made the choice at, sort of request of our legal eagles that we wait a bit. And so it's just, we hope to be able to do this, but we may not be able to until other issues are resolved. So just in transparency.
Yeah, I think we may be able to work around the edges, but I think thinking that all of 2022, maybe we get to it later in the year rather than the first part of the year. I agree with you, Skippy. It is a challenge that way. The one thing was, for me, it's going to be about incentives and disincentives, education, and then flat out, when you talk about disincentives, it's gonna have to start affecting resale at some point, or it may even be a transitionary program that will help you as new buyers by establishing the appropriate amount that should go in your HOA. But we're not going to pour it into your HOA until there's a special assessment of everyone, and then it'll just be your share. Things like that. So we're going to have to work with incentives, disincentives, edging it in over time. It's not going to be a one fell swoop and everything changes for everyone. It's going to be about how do you bring people along. Each one's going to be unique, and each one is going to be in different circumstances. The one thing I think we've started to acknowledge at some level is that we've built housing that people should have an income of $400,000 a year to support. We've sold it to people who have an income of $200,000 a year to support. Everyone in the HOA is in the same boat, and they all, without kind of going to a housing burden 40% of your income can't really upkeep what we've built and given them. And so I think there's some financial context and realities that we're going to need when we talk about policy development around this. That's where I was talking about fairness and equity, but we really need to not be working with anecdotal evidence or my personal experience or someone else's personal experience, but it's going to be a holistic look and look at the financial realities of the program we've created. Because right now, there's just a lot of kind of finger pointing. It's those homeowners haven't kept it up and those HOAs haven't kept it up. And in some cases, that's absolutely the truth. But in other cases, the HOAs have asked people for a reasonable amount. They keep investing, but things do keep deteriorating. And it might be beyond the ability to pay of the people we've sold the very units to. Mm-hmm. And so I want to get the financial context set for these decisions. And that's personally why I was so very happy to see the selection of our new director, because I think he's going to be very good on policy formulation and understanding policy nuance and the outcomes of those policies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Rachel. I think there's probably a lot of people in these HOAs that don't even know what an HOA capital reserve is.
Or should
never heard about it, never had a discussion about it, probably have one meeting a year of their HOA, and they talk about getting the grass cut as opposed to keeping up everybody's units. It's going to be a big project. There's going to be a lot of angry letters to the editor. There's going to be a lot of stories about it, but it is maybe one of the most important things that we can do.
Yeah. No, I think
so too.
That's well said. So some language about sort of a
the challenge,
unearthing of the challenge, but our unearthing of the objective numbers and data and the piece of education, which I know Dave you've talked about a lot in really eloquent terms, is going to be good.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Francie, anything else on that?
No, that's good, thank you.
Okay, fee study.
And I think
we should remove it.
Yeah, I do too. And
Great.
Let
Take it off
staff
the list.
look at it and see what we can really work with and what makes sense.
Yeah.
Great. Property management.
So Cindy and I, this one we probably won't include on yours. Well, you may know LIHTC properties, otherwise known as low-income tax credit properties. They require, we have plenty of work, and even if we didn't have LIHTC properties, we would have plenty of work for our team. That being said, they take a lot more work, and some, because of the income levels, they're much more challenging to fill. But the administrative overhead on these is so significant, and Trustcott Phase 2, there's only about, I think it's $5 million outstanding. So I think that's like for Cindy and me. So I'll put that one in, maybe shade that one.
Great.
I don't understand that one. I don't see why that one thing is the only thing in property management. Can you take just a second to clarify that for me, Diane?
Sure, I'll ask Cindy to describe the what and why behind this. But from a property management perspective, again, on a work plan, we're talking about what's new and different, not what's essential services. It's just like on a city council, when you go to a city council retreat, they're not talking about community policing, even though community policing is an essential service and is incredibly critical. It's just that when community policing becomes one of council's goals or starts showing up on the work plan as we have to redo it, it generally means that there's a problem with that essential service. So it's trying to say, hey, what APCHA, APCHA is on top of everything that APCHA does every day. Here are the new and different things that we want to make sure we're taking on.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to describe this one better, Cindy? The financing in Trustcott?
Well, it's what it is that there's always, when you do a low-income housing tax credit property, you get somebody gets a lot of tax credits off of it. And they're a syndicator. The syndicator was paid off. That loan went away. We still have about it's close to 5 million loan out to CHAPA, Colorado Housing Finance Authority. If right now we get audited every single year, the auditors can go, if they find one thing from a couple of years ago, they can go all the way back to the beginning and take millions of dollars away from the city. So it's approving everybody, and they pick files randomly, and you could have 2 numbers off and they write you up on that. So it's very, very time consuming to make sure that all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. I usually do it the other way around, I'm sorry.
T's crossed and I's dotted.
Yeah. And especially for T2, which is 87 units. Aspen Country Inn, we did just refinance that, so that those 40 units are what they are. That still has a priority for seniors. But T2, we're having a difficulty filling them. And so the city is basically losing rental money on it because the income is so low. If they were in our same category as T1, we would fill them up in a heartbeat. We would have no problems. And so this is something that I need to do some work on to get those figures so that the city realizes this is something that we need to pay off. And a couple of years ago, they talked about doing it. The city approached the housing board to say, oh, well, if you agree to this, we'll become the, there was because we have we're the general partners of it, and the city is limited partners of it because of the tax credits. And but by paying this off, it would change the I do believe that we would make our rental revenue would go up in T2 or in all of Truscott. And to me it's something that I know it takes away from the 150 fund, the money that's being used now for BG3 and possibly for the lumberyard, but to me it's something that I think makes sense to do in order to really be able to fill these units as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Rachel?
Yeah, just one thing for me, and I don't mean to be critical. I know I raised it when I first started on the board, but I think we would fill those units better if we were advertising in Spanish and had ads in the newspaper or in the Spanish versions down in the Sopra Sun, and let people know what those incomes are. They're hiring people at City Market at $14.75 an hour. You know, those people are not making high incomes. They have people who've been there for years who are lucky to be making $18 an hour. I don't think we're hitting the market. I don't think we are getting our information and our vacancies out to the people who are filling our lowest end jobs. And I think those jobs still exist here, certainly. And, you know, it's just something that, you know, we can't say in English, go to the website and find the button to click it to turn the website into Spanish and then see what the weekly rentals are. I've been pulling out my iPhone and showing people this at work who are struggling for housing for over a year now in English, and then asking someone else if you can translate this, or people pull out their phone and they try to say something into the phone and have the translation come out in Spanish. But I'm not convinced that we don't have a low-income workforce in this community,
Yeah.
and low-paying jobs, and we're just not reaching those people.
Yeah, I just adamantly second that. I mean, yeah. The workforce that needs that housing is driving 3 hours a day right now, and we're not reaching them.
We're not reaching them, and they're not in town understanding what is even offered.
Yeah, agreed. Anything else on work plan?
So I bumped that up to the top of the list for me of outreach to the Spanish language Latino community and finding every avenue we can.
Yeah,
I certainly agree with that. I think we should add that to the work plan.
Yeah, I think
Yep.
as opposed to just Spanish translations.
Outreach.
You know, how do we outreach and find the vast majority of our own workforce that we're just not familiar with.
And as you said, we probably should be doing this message not in Aspen.
Not in Aspen.
Not in Glenwood, not even necessarily.
Yeah.
Silt, parachute, rifle.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or, yeah, there's plenty throughout the valley.
Sure, but I
yeah,
mean,
know what
but
you're
that
saying.
far down valley is
Yeah.
where
Yes.
people are commuting from.
Yes.
Okay.
I do want to clarify, we have, for every open unit, there is a crazy amount, and Sydney can clarify this, but I think an unprecedented number of applicants. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, if we're having trouble finding applicants who've hit the income qualification, we're not getting the right applicants yet. And I'm sorry if, but I just, it's something that feels really powerfully wrong right now. If we're trying to raise the rental income from Truscott because we can't fill the units. But, and Diane, this is before your time, certainly, but there used to be a Wednesday ad in the the Aspen Daily News that everyone saw, and it was both in English and in Spanish, and people looked for that every Wednesday. And I understand the reason to not do that because it is very expensive on a low-income budget. But we don't even have an ad in Spanish that tells people where to go to look for this now. You have to be a kind of Aspen insider local who somebody has told you about the lotteries or told you about the housing openings and or on the website. But we don't have the presence in a lot of the ways that other people are getting their information, whether it's, and I don't do Spanish social media, but other people do. That's how most of the COVID information actually got out. So I think, like David said, this should be a real work plan item for me, is how does APCHA reach out to communities that we're really not serving but should be.
And a huge side effect of that is traffic off of the highway.
It could be traffic off the highway.
And Diane, I'm sure this is on your radar, but Manaus Foundation has been doing some really great work with not just Hispanic community, but lower income communities throughout the entire watershed on community-led housing development, and I think has a pretty good ear to the ground on how to contact people. So,
or just create this regular, ongoing channel.
Okay, Francie, I'm just going to the restroom, guys.
And I met with Barbara Freeman today, and she has an organization called La Medici. She came and presented to the BOCC a while ago, and she is working on some amazing programs it's called financial empowerment, I think, but to financially empower people, and she has a lot of connections. La Medici is helping people actually create savings, and so it's a really cool app, and she's got 1,800 people already saving money on it, and she is somebody who would be a great resource for this because it would fit right into her agenda of wanting to empower our low-paid Latino population, and I think she might have some avenues for our getting this kind of information out there. So just wanted to put in a little plug for her as a resource.
Very good.
Yeah, Francie, I saw her presentation at Rotary, and it was amazing.
Yeah, she's something else. Yeah.
Let me check in because we're scheduled till 7, so I want to see if that's going to push anything for staff.
Okay.
Okay, Diane, is that anything else for you?
Yep, that is great. I'll be not the next couple days, but Cindy and I are presenting to the city's leadership team on September 3rd. So I'll be updating this and bringing this back to the board as well. And I imagine we'll have a couple more conversations about it.
Yeah.
And thank you. This is I've got a lot of good notes in here as well as on the sheet itself.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, guys, we just have one more thing on our agenda, and Rachel has pointed out, we've lost Rick.
We don't
She's
have
trying
John,
to.
and we don't have Carson.
And I would agree with postponing this.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
Thank you.
Okay. So, and the goal for that was just to bring it back for first reading. So I guess the one thing I would just ask from people here, is there anything that like stood out that was glaringly in need of change from reading the packet, so that when it comes back next time, it's easier to kind of get to first reading? And you don't have to, but if there's anything that stood out, no.
Not that I can jump on.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that far into the packet, so I can't comment.
174 pages.
All right.
Lost me at 48.
We had a lot of information.
Great. Francie, was there anything that you would want staff to hear before the next meeting?
No, I've had my say. Thank you so much.
Okay. So we're going to move this. Diane.
Can I just highlight one thing in this report? And it's pretty much it's really the what's different this report to the last one, and where we definitely want to have the board thinking about this one. I appreciate the work that Cindy's done on looking into home track. Where are, what's the appreciation methodology for different ones? And right, 85% of them are 3% or CPI. The challenge is we still think, even though, if the world were unchanged and interest rates were doing what they've been doing in the past, it'd be easy to say, hey, go to 2.5%. In fact, if John were here, he'd probably say, do we want to go that high? Should we just go to 2% or something? Right now, CPI is with inflation is moving, right? It's higher than it's been historically. So is the question really is 2.5% the right number, and is the board comfortable with that? Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Diane. So thank you to everyone on the. Do you want to?
Well, actually, this is just a really random thought here, Diane, because I know we're all trying to deal with this issue. And I hate to put it quite this way, but should there be 2 appreciation rates? And this is weird, but one appreciation is what the seller would get, and one appreciation might be what we would say that unit would normally go up to if we didn't have quite this cap in such a way so that, again, this is just highly conceptual, but I'm thinking, what if someone's unit, again, the older units, maybe it's our older units that have been in the same ownership for a long time. But what if you were to say, well, your unit goes up at 2% a year, and that's great. That's what you can get if you maintain these basic internal standards. But we know that this unit, if we sold it new, would be selling for $100,000 more than we're going to let you sell that for, And so we're going to say of that $100,000, we're actually going to list it for $50,000 more than what you're going to get, your appreciation rate, and that other $50,000 is going to go into the unit to modernize it, or to the HOA, to the thing, to things like that. But I mean, what if, because right now we're telling people your appreciation rate is being kept low so that someone else can buy your unit at an affordable price. And we want you to keep that unit pretty much like brand new out of that appreciation rate that we're keeping it suppressed at. Whereas when we do new construction, we know we're going to have to sell it up here, or it's going to cost up here. But so are we creating that dynamic of we're keeping you down at inflation only, and then we're going to take that back away from you to fix the unit up later, even though we know the cost of a new unit would have gone up so very much. I mean, I'm just trying to think, if we were to say, damn, that unit is so nice and a great place, and we're going to redo the kitchen and redo the bathroom, so we're going to sell it for $40,000 more than you're going to get for your sale price, and that will become the new basis for the new owner, for their appreciation. But I mean, should we, are we trying to do this with just one tool, and we need 2 tools?
Yeah, I think we've maybe not exactly in that permutation, but I think we've we've talked about that. Certainly, I've had discussions. I think with
Yeah.
you and with Tori and with Ward, and in the lead up of if we did something like that, there needs to be some initial pool of money. You'd earn it back, but for
Or
the
maybe you'd
turn,
earn it back, yeah.
right? Well, I mean, like the program would earn it back, right? On the turn where you would raise the price, and I think that there's been a general feeling of like, yeah, like we need to make that investment, even if it comes out of the 150 fund. And we hope that there will be few of those units where that's required, but for those that are there, I think that there's an interest in that.
The biggest thing is that what we're dealing with, and I'm sure Cindy and staff know this more than anyone else, is a totally non-homogenized system. Every unit is different. Every unit has its own story. And I don't know if you can get them into tiers of some sort, that there's a kind of like a patient as it ages. You have a treatment path for one person with a problem who's 65. You might have a different treatment path for a person with the same problem who's only 30. So do you have a different treatment path for the guy who just bought that unit 4 years ago versus the person who bought it 40 years ago and the person at 20? I mean, I just don't know. I don't want to make anything more complicated, but sometimes it's like rearranging your house. You have to blow everything up to put it back in different places and rearrange the furniture. And so that's what I'm kind of doing by asking the questions. It's just saying, are there possibilities we're not thinking of?
Yeah. Well, for members of the public, thank you for joining us at our next meeting. We're going to have 2 big items, so feel free to tune in, and if you have thoughts, you can reach out to the board. You can email or call any of us with thoughts, or you can come to that meeting. That will be that revised deed restriction, and we will also be looking at what we've been calling standards for sellers, and we may be now calling interior capital upkeep and maintenance. I don't know, but those will get paired together, and those will be really transformative things. And the goal at the next meeting will be to take those and then bring them back at the next meeting in a first reading form, so we can actually get moving on these things. So with that, I would take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
I second.
With a first and a second, Cindy, would you read the roll?
Yes, David,
Yes.
Rachel,
Yes.
Francie,
Yes.
thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Francie.
We are
With that,
adjourned.
thank you, everyone. Travel safe, Rachel.
Yeah.
And we'll see y'all back here in 2 weeks.
Good meeting.
2 weeks, yeah.
Got a lot.
By the way, Merle's 100% full.
Yeah,
For the winter already? Wowzers.
Wowzers.
Well.
Not a